What's a subtle sign that someone is a good person but doesn't want to show it? Zachboy789 said. Probably a boring answer, but I have this friend who I can just tell is really sincere when he asks how I'm doing. I appreciate anyone asking because it's a convenient conversation starter, but with him I can tell he actually cares what the answer is. Ono Spaghettio said. I have been trying for the last few years to stop, take a breath and be ready to listen to the reply when I ask how are you? To anybody. Including the coffee guy I will probably never met again. Just a genuine I see you human and hope you are okay question. It is amazing how much people open up and make connections when you yourself are ready to. 23784-930-920291 said. Discretion. I see it as a sign of empathy, most of times, at least. They anticipate that openness may be undesirable for you and so they remain discreet in order to make you more comfortable. Be it regarding some information you shared with them or when helping you out with something, no questions asked. They make me your pants said. I've found that saying I don't need to know more if you're not comfortable telling me is one of the surest ways to get someone to unload all of it on me. I've completely meant it every time I've said it and also have learned to expect this reaction. Smith by 88 said. Had a teacher growing up that came across as very strict and standoffish, gave off this air of learn the material or fail. In reality though, he would answer any questions you had, even if it was being repeated, was incredibly patient, and would stay as late as he needed to in order to make sure the students understood the material. If a majority of the class bombed a test he would address it with the class to understand what went wrong, and would redo the material if needed. Looking at him or just popping by his class, you'd think he'd be a typical hard ass, but in reality he cared immensely about making sure we understood our lessons and were prepared for the next year. Ursidope said. My AP Calc teacher in high school was pretty similar to this. While he doesn't necessarily look intimidating, he walks around with a cup that says student tears and will not hesitate to say things like, hey, student, maybe if you actually paid attention in class you wouldn't get 70s on all your tests when a kid was talking during his teaching. He would make fun of all of us for the dumb things we did, but he knew what all of our boundaries were. He would only say something like that to certain kids he knew could handle it. He was also the best dang teacher I ever had. Had a 99% pass rating on the AP Calc BC exam over his 10+ years of teaching it. He would be there before and after school and also during lunch for help or just to let you chill in his room. They are the best teachers. He also collects ties and coffee mugs that his students bring back from their colleges. And very proudly uses them. Event talk he told all of us, don't bother giving me a grad party invite because I will not go LOL. CSCF0360 said. I had a math teacher like this in high school. She assigned mountains of homework and was super obnoxious about showing your work for everything. I was always a bit of a challenge for her. I picked up the material super quickly, but unknowingly had undiagnosed ADD so I would immediately lose interest the second I grasped the ideas. And showing work was painful when I could find shortcuts to get the right answers. She eventually wore me down to the point where I did show all of my work and kept me engaged by calling on me to go up to the board and do a difficult problem in front of the class while talking through what I was doing. Looking back, I realized she was calm, infinitely patient and as thorough as the student needed her to be. She could communicate advanced concepts in multiple ways so that every student could grasp the concept in the way that made the most sense to them. CSCF0360 said. After college, I went back and thanked her for being by far the best math teacher I'd ever had. She told me that she had regular visits from prior students like me, and that those visits are what drove her. I never really saw it while her student, but she had a killer wry sense of humor. I inadvertently took up her entire off period and apologized profusely when students started coming in, but she insisted that I stay for a few minutes. She asked if I remembered how to complete the square, which was a method for solving a particular type of polynomials. Yeah, I think so. She wrote the problem on the board and asked me to solve it while explaining all of the steps. I can't express how happy that made me and how proud I was to do it perfectly for her. Bravo, Mr. CFCS. Have you done that since you were last in my class 5 years ago? No. Then tell me, was all of that homework worth it? Yes. Absolutely. Alice's account said, I had a physics professor in college who was terrifying. Tough as nails, incredibly and intimidatingly smart, and, also, okay, remember Matt Foley, the Chris Farley motivational speaker who lived in a van down by the river? He was terrifying like that. And really demanding. His lectures were fast-paced and my hand would be sore from taking notes every day in his class. His homework sets were not easy. His exams were brutal. But I got to know him over time, and I saw how incredibly hard he worked to be a better professor, whether as a teacher or a mentor for both undergrads and grad students, or as a researcher himself. You can imagine that women in his class might be intimidated. One woman described how he would intentionally call on her during lectures, because he tried really hard to call on everybody, and specifically women, so as to correct for what we now call implicit bias, etc. And B. He stopped calling on her when she asked him to stop, because she was just trying to keep up in class and didn't like to be put on the spot. He ended up having a number of women in his lab. There were plenty of professors in the department who seemed much more enlightened, but who were absolutely the reason that so few women stay in physics. He was the opposite. He was simply amazing. Like your professor, he came across as a typical hard ass, but holy shit he cared so much and worked so hard for his students, both as a physicist and as a person. Splickety-lit said, hardasses are often the people who care, the good ones are the ones who know how to help, but regardless, all of them teachers, have to put up with an insane amount of senseless shit. Edit. Someone gave a helpful alert and I opened it to look at it and accidentally deleted it, to that person. I want to say I'm sorry, it was an accident. Strata who said, admonishes people for being rude to wait staff. I was at a family dinner at a pub restaurant years ago, and my sister was very rude to the waiter because her steak was overcooked or something, really went hard on him, and my brother's new girlfriend, who always seemed a shy and quiet person, told my sister to basically stop being a bitch and that the waiters didn't cook the food, and you're embarrassing all of us, everyone's looking at us etc. From that point on, I knew she was a good sort. Roll Trap said, when my ex-best friend and I first met, we spent the night at my place watching YouTube videos and showing each other our favorite music. She said that I was the first one to actually shut up and listen to what she wanted to show me instead of talking or mentioning stuff about my next YouTube clip I wanted to show her. Damn, I miss her. Roll Trap said, it's a complicated story but I'll try to keep it short. 3 years ago I had a bad cocaine addiction, still have but sober now. One day I went to buy from my dealer and while walking he said that he didn't have any real friends, since everyone that called him on Lou wanted to buy. So the next morning I texted him good morning and genuinely asked how he was doing. We became friends, or so I thought. He took bad advantage of me. She was also a customer of him and we met when he and I were gaming at my place and she came to buy. He left and she and I got to know each other. For context, I'm man and she's a lesbian woman, early 20s. She always said we'd be a couple if it weren't for she preferring women. We were soulmates. Then 2 years later, 2021, her drug habit became really problematic and my dealer friend started to like her. He manipulated her with horrible lies and deeds. She broke contact with her girlfriend, friends and myself and had sex with him for drugs. I have no idea where she now is or how she's doing, but my mom said it's not going well. She still sends my mom the occasional text but my mom doesn't want to tell me all of it. Even her parents won't talk to her anymore and they were close. Her mom was diagnosed with cancer 2 years ago and they were really close. I went trough hell because she was my best friend. I felt like a kid around her. I could be myself without being worried about anything. I quit the drugs and moved to another city. I occasionally send her a text and email to ask how she's doing and to tell her I'm still here for her, but so far no answer. I miss her. Drugs are so good but they suck so hard. Fuck. Bethlebeth said, guy I used to work with was such a class clown, always cracking jokes. Everybody liked him because he was so funny. It was a while before I realized that his jokes were never at anybody's expense. He was kind. There was never anything mean in anything he ever said, to anybody's face or behind their back. Anyway, we're married now. His Aplaya said, what most people don't realize is that bit of common courtesy shows that you recognize the other person as a human being whose time and emotions also have value. Many people are so lacking in self-awareness and empathy that they simply do not value other people's time. Thanks for taking the time to care. I really appreciate you. Edit. To add to this, we all have our blind spots and we all have our off days. You are not automatically a monster if you forget to be polite one time. The good news is we can learn our blind spots and grow our whole lives if we just tell ourselves to take our time once in a while. Carp 8DM said, I waited tables at a pretty popular New Mexican restaurant when I was in college. There was this one manager, her name was Rosie, and she never smiled. She always looked like she was pissed off at everyone and everything. The entire waitstaff and bus staff feared her. When she walks into the kitchen and wanted something, the line would immediately jump to her demands. It was rumored that she was the person to fire any employee when an employee was fired. The only people that didn't seem to be scared of her were the hostesses. They were always talking to her like she was just any other manager or person in the restaurant. She scared the hell out of me for the first year I worked there. I made sure that she never had anything to be upset at with me. One day, I came into work sick as fuck and having just a really bad day. She took me to the side and talked to me for a good half hour, just asking questions about my day and how school was going. Towards the end of the conversation she said I didn't look good and that if I wanted to, I could take the night off. Carp 8DM said, Rosie was the best fucking person I ever met inside the restaurant industry. From that day on it was my goal to make her laugh. I never did make her laugh, but I got a smile out of her quite a bit after that. She was not just a good person, she was one of the best. But man, you wouldn't know it unless you really took the time to look. She was one of those types of people you know had a hard time in life and put up a rough exterior. But deep down she was a softie and loving grandmother type. I hope she's happy in her retirement. Atlas Ninja 13 said, when someone is actually in trouble needs help, they will help out, even if it's really subtle or disguised as something else. For instance, there was a kid in my school who had a reputation for not caring about others, doing whatever he wanted, and tried to convince everyone that he pretty much had no emotions. I think he thought it made him seem more tough and hardcore, and although he didn't necessarily do anything bad to anyone, he tried not to seem kind either. Once, one of my friends at school had some sort of emergency where she needed, I think, $30. Most people in class either didn't have $30, which was quite a bit for a kid to bring to school, to loan her, or they just didn't want to give it to her, thinking they would never get it back, and she was panicking. The teachers couldn't help her for some sort of legal reason. I think she wanted to take a taxi to the hospital because something had happened to a family member but was slightly underage, and the teachers had to pretend that they had no idea she was doing this. Atlas Ninja 13 said, so, this kid with the reputation collected money from all of his friends, since he didn't have the money himself, under the pretense of another reason. I think it was something like movie tickets or something for that evening. Then, he privately gave it to her, but told her not to tell anyone it was him. I was close friends with her and was actually standing right next to her when he approached us and told us this. She managed to get to the hospital on time, while he paid for the tickets or whatever with his own money once he got home. When she later offered to pay him back, he refused, insisting that he didn't do anything. I think he knew that her family would struggle to pay that back. They were having some financial trouble. I guess it's not extremely subtle in my case since I was standing right there, but that was the first time I began realizing how some people pretended to not be a good person when they actually were. Atlas Ninja 13 said, wow, I'm so glad he's doing well now. The boy who I witnessed helping the girl out is also doing well, I think. He's in a great program in college studying to become a doctor. Interestingly enough, I think he also had a lot of trouble with his own mother, who put a lot of pressure on him. I hope that still isn't the case now that he's in college, but I really have no idea. That's terrible about the abusive mother, though. It's so sad to think that a parent would do that, especially to her own child. If you're casually friends, I wonder if it would be nice to mention how you remember how he helped out the girl. Maybe it would show how these small acts of kindness really make a difference in people's lives. Lord of Shalot said, same. I'd be there for anyone who needed me in a heartbeat if I knew they wanted my help, but I'm learning about myself that my parents were walled off and emotionally preoccupied growing up. So I internalized the message that loving others means giving them space and not inflicting myself on them. When I sense people are overwhelmed, I become very worried that having to respond to a text or a phone call from me will be what pushes them over the edge. It seems like a silly thing to worry about, but I've seen so many people tweeting and posting about being overwhelmed by electronic communication since the pandemic began that it's reinforcing my communication anxiety. Honest Textile said, I think a good example is seeing someone who's being quietly upset or trying to do normal things while being clearly upset, and the cold person acting like they don't see it. I think that if someone's trying to hold it together, asking them what's wrong or giving them concerned looks that show you know they're barely holding it together actually isn't always the best course of action or kindest thing to do. It's situational, but having been that crying person a few times and having people I don't even know that well expect me to hurt more while telling them all about it, yeah. Sometimes just letting it be can be the best thing. Ho 812A said, my ex-wife's father was diagnosed with a stage 4 cancer. About 2 months before he passed, my in-laws' apartment burned down. No renter's insurance, almost everything went up in smoke due to electrical fire. They moved in with us. Right around same time my AC went, so I called a friend of a friend and he came out to look at AC. Did a $800 or so job and we were just shooting shit and I told him casually about the fire. He wouldn't take a penny and told me to use the money to buy something for her parents at their new place. Bedding, whatever stuff they needed. Wouldn't take the money, full stop. I used the money for their security deposit on the place. None of our so-called close friends did such thing. No one bothered to even ask how they can help. About 6 months later, he invited us to his birthday party. We went and I said a toast, telling everyone how good of a person he was. I had a hard time finishing the toast, because almost everyone choked up. Except my ex, who looked at me like I was scum. When we got home, she said, I was so embarrassed you were singing him praises. You don't even know this man and yet it was like you were trying to climb up his ass. You're pathetic. It didn't matter what they did, apparently, because I put out the cash. The fact that I was going to pay that money to him and he didn't take it, giving it to her parents apparently didn't matter. So here are the two opposites. No regrets. Perk Thrower said, I was at school with a guy who was the king of the cool kids. He was always getting busted for breaking school rules, drinking, smoking, bad-mouthing the teachers and so on. In fact, he did a bit of jail time later, for non-violent low-level drug dealing. I was the uber geek of the school. I didn't get bullied as such, but I remember one time that his cool gang kids were ribbing me a bit too much, and he stepped in and told them to cool it, and a bit later, when I won the school academic prize, he went out of his way to sincerely congratulate me. In fact, a few years later, and after the jail time, he became pretty well known as a TV personality and had his own show, where he was generally lauded as giving the impression of being a really nice guy, which, in this case, he was. Nico Carbon said, I think they mean that there are some people that are quiet and not usually complain or engage in any conflicts, but have unambiguous and uncharacteristic reactions when they feel someone has been wronged. I like these kind of persons as they usually make a difference, especially in work or formal situations. When that guy or girl that usually does not object to things express concern about a situation, it usually gets more attention than the people that are always objecting to things. Osomia 5000 said, I had a maths teacher who used to bust my chops. He was fun, but also very temperamental. He'd be silly to a point, then tell you off when you out-sillied his silliness. I was sat opposite a quiet girl who suddenly looked really distressed. She said something to him in a whisper, and he looked down to a puddle on the floor. She'd wet herself. This was when we were 11-12, so it was quite a big deal. I clocked this at the same time, and he gave me this look like don't you dare. He went over to his desk, poured himself a water, then came back and was pretending to peer at her work, before stumbling and dropping it on her. He apologized and made a big scene and told her she could go and get a spare uniform from the office as it was his mistake. I really respected that. I think it showed a lot about his character and care. White Shirt Dad said, there's a bluebird in my heart that wants to get out but I'm too tough for him. I say, stay in there. I'm not going to let anybody see you. There's a bluebird in my heart that wants to get out, but I pour whiskey on him and inhale cigarette smoke, and the whores and the bartenders and the grocery clerks never know that he's in there. There's a bluebird in my heart that wants to get out, but I'm too tough for him. I say, stay down. Do you want to mess me up? You want to screw up the works? You want to blow my book sales in Europe? There's a bluebird in my heart that wants to get out, but I'm too clever. I only let him out at night, sometimes when everybody's asleep. I say, I know that you're there, so don't be sad. Then I put him back, but he's singing a little in there. I haven't quite let him die, and we sleep together like that with our secret pact, and it's nice enough to make a man weep, but I don't weep, do you? Charles Bukowski. Midas Art Flower said, you must actually catch them in action, because they will not call attention to themselves in any way. They're the ones who allow others to merge in traffic or stop short of a commercial driveway to let a car out into traffic. They'll see a cart abandoned in the lot, walk to it, and take it into the store to use. They'll bring coupons from home that they won't use and place them on the market shelves for others. They'll call the cashier by name, engage them in conversation rather than play with their phone, and make them smile. Mentorpheus said, they'll see a cart abandoned in the lot, walk to it, and take it into the store to use. Take? Hell, I ride that thing across the lot to the entrance. Then leave it in a cart corral for better than zero-sum result. It's apparently quite a spectacle to see a 50-something man doing this. Adults scoff while children point and stare with jealousy. My brother worked as a cart pusher in high school and had lots of tales of inconsiderate drivers treating them as disobedient peons who should be able to levitate a 2-ton column of carts sideways so as not to inconvenience the customer class of people. This was before remote cart pushers were a thing, so they literally pushed columns of 1-2 dozen carts all day. He said literally every time, someone would cut in front of the carts they were pushing, then get mad when the person at the back end couldn't make the whole column stop on a dime from the rear. Should be obvious, you stop the cart you're pushing on, then all the rest of them disengage from it and continue forward according to Newton's laws. Doom 4104 said, they say they don't like helping people, but they continue to help others, and go for a job occupation that is centered around helping protecting others. My best friend is like that. She is in the military, more specifically the National Guard, and always stands for what's right, and helps others. She cares about other people more than she does herself, and will go above and beyond to help someone, be there for them, and keep them safe despite her saying I don't like helping people. Her helpful actions are what led to her becoming my best friend, and I've had her in my life since middle school. I've never met a more pure, perfect human being than her. Calliope 720 said, I know people like this. One of my closest friends is a person that, on the surface, I used to think was a total asshole. For the first year or two I knew him as a casual acquaintance. He'd always go on about how other people complain too much, other people can't help themselves, other people make dumb choices, etc., and it really put me off. And to be fair, those are kinda shitty things to say. But over time I started to watch his actions more than his words, because I noticed something interesting. He was always volunteering to take care of other people, to the point of being taken advantage of himself. Always lending things and money, letting people stay in his house, driving people long distances, doing yard work and housework for friends while they were incapacitated, even handling some legal accounting stuff for folks, all completely unsolicited, just stepping into the role when needed. I came to understand this pessimistic griping in a new light. He grew up in a toxic, abusive environment and didn't learn how to freely express emotions like trust and affection and concern without being punished for them. His way of expressing love gets channeled into a complaint, where he can safely say I love this person a lot and I'm very concerned for them without being perceived as weak. So-and-so is such a dumbass, why can't they get their shit together from him means I am scared something bad is going to happen to this person and I want better for them than this. He's done this with me too. Is it ideal? No, definitely not. But we've had fights where he's said to me that's idiotic, that's complete bullshit, and I have felt deeply loved by that, because I know what it really means. He's also done a ton of favors for me, unsolicited. Too much caffeine for you said. This is pretty small, but I once only vaguely knew a guy who was a big bro dude. I only met him a handful of times, but something I noticed about him is that when we were in a group discussion, he would sometimes instinctively start talking over someone, but he literally always noticed and stopped himself in a way that made it seem like it was something he was actively working on. This is an arena where not only was it really common for men to speak over women, but for people to just generally speak over each other a lot. I essentially didn't know that much about him except that I could tell he was actively working to stop himself from speaking over other people, especially women whose voices didn't carry as well as his did. Throw data away said. I have an example of this. Had a commander in the Navy who had just arrived to our ship. My new department head. He was a huge asshole. Everyone was especially in line when he was around. When I had my one-on-one get-to-know-you thing with him, I wasn't told and was unprepared. It was legit not my fault and my supervisor apologized to both of us for forgetting to tell me. I was also a knucklehead and not using military bearing when talking to him. Boy oh boy, he had me close the door and he chewed me out real good. At the end, he promised me that if I do my part and do my job as expected, he'll be in my corner no matter what. I was so nervous around this guy ever since. But one day I entered a competition in my profession and was selected for a really special training opportunity. Only 14 people in all of the military would be selected, so this was big. I was denied because it was too short notice for our executive officer, his boss. But my department had kept his promise and argued on my behalf. The commanding officer saw the whole dialogue and approved my special orders and got me on the plane the next day. TLDR, integrity when it counts. This guy was scary as hell, but he went out of his way to keep his promise. Arguing with his own boss on my behalf led to training that changed my life. Coffee and pizza rolls said. Definitely the way they treat animals. My husband went through a lot of a trauma and in order to break free of his people-pleaser mode, he kind of turned into an asshole. But seeing how gentle he is with animals' children and how much he loves them, I knew he still had a soft heart. He still struggles with being a C to protect himself, but he's definitely shown more of his loving side over the years. On the flip side, I had a family member who loved to pretend they were a good person but abused and neglected their pets or at least yelled at them constantly when we were around. After a while we realized they had a mean heart.